Pish Posh. Clouds flit and fly with the wind as it blows across the seas. The clouds drop a little rain here and a little snow there as they circle and dip around the world. But when they have loosed all their thunder and need somewhere quiet to rest, the clouds roll slowly around and up the magical, majestic mountains of Machu Picchu. There, after resting, they gather together to go once more around the world, only to return again and again to Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu was filled with a variety of gentle creatures who lived and loved its mountainous country. There were birds that, as they flew, captured billowing clouds under their enormous wings. There were fishes that swam in the mighty rivers that gurgled and giggled over waterfalls and rushing rapids. And there were furry four-legged creatures of every kind that bounded and bounced about the rocks and meadows of these mighty mountains. One of the many creatures who lived high upon these mountains was a llama named Posh. The wool that came from Posh's fur was the finest of fine. It could even be said that his wool was better than the best. This, and the fact that he lived up in the mountains, high above the other creatures, led Posh to believe that he was better than anyone else in Machu Picchu. One of Posh's favorite things to do was to wander the hills and valleys, looking for a creature who was his equal or better. A creature better than me? An impossible feat indeed, he said to himself as he walked beside the winding river. He stopped to gaze down at his own reflection in the water, but it was broken by a fish leaping for a bug. Posh looked at the fish with great disdain and said, "Fish are such ugly, ugly little creatures. Ugly little eyes, ugly little scales, ugly little fins, and such ugly, ugly little tails. Creatures with no purpose at all." Satisfied that fish could never be his equal, let alone his better, he stuck his nose in the air and walked away with tiny little steps to continue his search. Later that day, he climbed one of the many high, jagged peaks of Machu Picchu. Following his nose, which was high in the air already, he climbed and climbed until he came to a place where he had to go down. It was from this vantage that Posh watched the birds as they flew, dipping and soaring over the mountains high. Posh watched in horror as one bird flew so close that it actually mussed his precious wool coat. Posh threw his nose into the air and said, "Birds are such rude, clumsy creatures. Rude and clumsy, clumsy and rude. Fat, feathered birds are simply rude and clumsy, and they serve no purpose at all." And with that, the snooty llama lifted his nose even higher into the air and minced along his way. When the sun was at its hottest, usually between early bright light and dark all the way down, Posh stopped his search to rest in the cool shade at the edge of a shadowy glade. As he lay there looking about, occasionally munching a bit of grass or a lilac or lily, he watched the bunnies as they played about the meadow. Now, bunnies play silly raucous games, and they always get out of hand. And so, as Posh was munching his lunch, a bit in a bunch, one of the bunnies hopped over his back as it played. With all the disdain he could muster, Posh mumbled and muttered, "Horrid little bunnies, ugly furry things, long ugly ears, floppy fuzzy feet. Horrid little bunnies are such ugly, ugly things. Oh, they serve no purpose at all." And up into the air he lofted his nose once again, as he went looking for his equal or better. The very next day, as fate would have it, Posh met his equal in the likes of another llama named Pish. At first Posh thought he was looking at his own reflection. The coat was of the finest wool, the legs straight and graceful. Posh looked once, Posh looked twice, and noticed quite truly that Pish looked very, very nice, a perfect creature that was his equal. "You wouldn't believe," said Posh to Pish as he chuckled, "all the trouble I have had finding a creature in Machu Picchu that was my equal or better. I saw the horrid bunnies and the rude, clumsy birds. Why, Pish, I even gazed upon the ugly little fish, hideous creatures that serve no purpose at all." Posh laughed and laughed, and as his vicious laughter rang throughout the mountains of Machu Picchu, Pish watched him in astonishment. "You know," said Pish, "all the creatures may be ugly to you, but in fact they are beautiful and important in their own special way." Posh stopped his laughing with a giggle and gulp and thought for a moment. "Well, that may very well be true, but ugly or not, surely they serve no purpose at all. "Come, let me show you," Posh said as he led Pish back to the river and the fish. They waited at the edge of the stream for a moment, maybe two, and then one of the fish splashed and splished right in front of Pish. Pish swished her head and gently said, "Why, look at how delightful the fish are, Posh. There's scales to protect them from the rocks and the fast-running water. Their fins move them against the current, and their tails guide them wherever they want to go. They eat and are eaten as a very important link in the food chain." Posh was very annoyed, for Pish was right beyond all doubt. "Well," Posh snorted snobbishly, "the fish may serve some purpose, but just wait until I show you the rude, clumsy birds that fly about." Pish and Posh climbed the jagged peaks of Machu Picchu. Up and up they climbed until they came to the place where there was no more up, only down. As they watched, a flock of birds swirled and dipped in the sky above them. Pish watched in awe and then patiently said, "The birds' wings give them lift against the wind so they can swoop and glide. As they glide and fly, they eat hundreds of tiny little bugs that otherwise would be trying to bite you or me. So you see, Posh, the birds serve a wonderful purpose, and they fill the sky with music." "Well," Posh said with much disdain, "the fish may serve a purpose, and the birds serve a purpose, but just wait until I show you those horrid little bunnies." With a snap of his head, Posh led a chuckling Pish down the mountain to the rabbits below. Together they waited, munching a bit of lunch in the cool shade. Sure enough, it wasn't very long before the bunnies came out into the meadow to play. Pish watched and laughed as the bunnies cavorted, playing some silly rabbit game. "Look," said Pish, "the bunnies have long ears, so that they might hear the tiniest sounds there are to hear. Their feet are large, so they can bound high and run fast. And besides being food for other animals, they make me laugh." Posh stood there and thought of all his newfound friend had said. Then he squinted his eyes and spoke in a tinny, lofty voice. "I have shown you the fish, Pish. I have shown you the rude and clumsy birds and the horrid little bunnies. Before listening to all you said, I thought you were my equal, but now I don't think you have a purpose either." Pish looked at Posh and bitterly said, "Yes, Posh, I guess to you I really serve no purpose. To be your equal, I would have to believe that I was better than everyone else, but I am not. My neck is long and ugly, my ears are too small, and my legs seem to be too long. Yet my fur makes marvelous wool. My purpose is no greater or less than any other creature's." With that, Pish walked away, her tail swishing behind her. So Posh continued to search for his equal or better throughout the majestic mountains of Machu Picchu. With his nose held high so that his eyes could not truly see, he walked from valley to valley on narrow, twisted paths, searching for something that he would never find. For you see, when your nose and head are held too high, you, like Posh, can't truly see what is around you, and when that happens, you serve no purpose at all. As you go along in life, don't put your nose into the air, for all creatures have a purpose, each one beautiful and rare.